What surprised you most about homemaking?
I do not know how you can be bored with this job if you truly embrace it. We see homes that are empty because everybody's gone at work, but is there flourishing happening there?
What would you say to a mom who says, I'm bored in this role as a homemaker?
I would just challenge her to...
What's
One of the things about being married young, that qualified us for all kinds of ways to get in debt. I hope they still don't do this because this should be illegal, but the credit card companies, they would set up a table outside of the student union and give out free movie tickets if you would just sign up for their credit card. We had our first child and we were looking at how long it was going to take us to pay off the credit card debt. We just kind of said, we don't want to be here again.
How do you personally see homemaking as an art?
No artist came out of the womb with a paintbrush in their hand. We only get to see the very best works, whether it's in the art gallery or on Instagram. We don't get to see all the fails and all the, hundreds of messy or ugly paintings that somebody made. And it's the same thing with homemaking. There's way more of that than those masterpieces. So we have to be okay with failure.
Okay, friends, I have a real treat for you today. I'm here with my friend Alison Weeks from the Art of Home podcast, and we are doing an episode actually in the same format that she uses for her homemaker portraits on her podcast. So if you love this episode, you will absolutely love her podcast. So you need to go check that out. Can you share a little bit then about how you first became a homemaker and if you brought any skills to the table in that regard?
Yes. So I would say 1992 when we got married.
Okay.
Like I said, we were 18, 19. We moved out of our parents' homes and moved in together after our marriage. And we had this little place that was a total dump. I've talked about it on the show before. We did not live there very long because it was us and a bunch of rats. So...
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was
Did
bad.
you know that before? You probably didn't know that before you signed the lease.
We did not.
Oh.
So, yeah, that was our first experience with the little house that we rented at first. So that was fun. As far as skills, I did have skills, but I felt like they just needed to be honed and practiced. So my mom taught me, basic stuff. I could take care of myself. I could do laundry. I could cook. I could clean. I just wasn't super motivated to do things in like an orderly fashion. And I would get really distracted by the shiny, fun things of homemaking. That was kind of my downfall, especially in the beginning. And that's still something that I have to really fight against. So
what do you mean by the shiny, fun things? Like the producing things instead of maintaining, or?
Yeah, I think so. That's a really good way to put it. And actually, my husband and I have made that observation before about each of us. Like I'm a creative producer person, more of a maintainer. That's what he enjoys. So we're a good match. When it comes to the homemaking stuff, I would much rather like make a fun craft or decorate something for the house, than clean the toilets. I mean, why? That's a no-brainer choice in my mind.
Was there anybody else that influenced your homemaking in a positive or memorable way?
Yes, but when I was a young mom, I came across this book called No Ordinary Home, The Uncommon Art of Christ-Centered Homemaking. I read it like 5 times. It's out of print, but you can there's ones floating around out there, in used bookstores online and stuff. But the author talked about having a committee of women. She was overwhelmed with her homemaking, and she talked about she needed a committee to come alongside and help her. And she prayed about it, and the Lord really started showing her, you have this committee. You have this friend and this person and your mom. And so she kind of gathered together these women in her mind, of course, and said, okay, what can I learn from her? And what can I learn from her? And she went to them and she said, please teach me this. That really opened my eyes to how many women, my own committee, like how many women God had put in my life, allowed me to learn from the time I was very young until all through, the over 30 years that I've been doing this job now.
I think it's really significant that you bring up the idea of a committee because I do think some women are out there looking for the perfect mentor, the one that has like the clean house and the well-behaved children and is super extroverted and hospitable and has like this gentle and quiet spirit, and I think it's really significant that you are pinpointing different people and saying it's not just this one mentor that impacted you, it's multiple people, different people having different skills, and they collectively mentor you in the faith. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
really helpful because the perfect woman doesn't
She
exist,
doesn't exist. Yeah.
and that's something I have just had to learn, like, because I keep thinking, oh, there'll just be this one woman that will mentor me in
Mm-hmm.
everything, and that's not feasible. What would you say, though, to the mom who's listening and doesn't feel like she has that person? I know
Mm-hmm.
you said go find them.
Yeah.
What did that look like for you, maybe in different seasons? Or what would you
Sure.
recommend if someone just didn't grow up with all these wonderful grandmothers and mother figures in their lives who
Mm-hmm.
can mentor them? Hey, mamas. I just wanted to jump in for a quick second and say that if you are tired and exhausted as a stay-at-home mom, go ahead and take a second to click subscribe to this podcast. Every week, I share encouraging content from either myself or other more experienced mamas about how to go from surviving to thriving as a stay-at-home mom.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question, and we've talked about that on the show before because I've received that question quite a lot. Um, and I would just say, um, I was in that position. We always moved. We moved a lot, and we moved away, very far away from my family. So I had to find those women in other arenas, and the first place I would look would be church. Um, just seeking them out, and I often would meet them at Bible study. So I would go to Bible study, and we would get in the Word together. I would listen to what those women in that circle were saying. I would, ask for discernment from the Lord. But then if I found someone or a couple of people who I kind of connected with, and I felt like, okay, I'm hearing a lot of wisdom from this person, I think this would be somebody that I could learn from. And then you have to be brave and you have to go to them and ask. But I've talked about this a lot. It's so important that you be, number one, very specific about what you're asking. And number two, be realistic. Like you said, like you're not going to find everything in the one woman, and don't expect her to be able to give you all of her time. So tell them what you're looking for. Hey, could you come over and, teach me how to make your famous pie crust next Tuesday? Like, be as specific as you can so she knows what she's saying yes to, right? And then the final thing is be willing to be turned down. And almost always it's not because they don't like you. It's not because they don't want to mentor you. It's because maybe it's just not the right season for them. They may have a lot going on. So you have to be willing to be rejected and be okay with that, because you will find the person.
That's smart. Well, it's smart to be specific. So then, because I think sometimes the rejection can be like fear of
Like, what am I signing up for?
Ambiguous commitment. Like, did I just commit to 10 years of,
Exactly.
like, what did I? So I'll just say no just to be safe. So that's very, very wise. It's like, you've done this before or something,
Yeah.
Allison. That's great. Can you share a little bit about what you would feel like your greatest homemaking strength and weakness would be? We could maybe start with strength and then move to weakness, but
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I would say that my strength is that thing I learned from my grandma, which is I love to learn and I love to try new things.
Aw.
I just will try. I felt like wallpapering my kitchen one time and I was like, I'm going to learn how to do this. This was before the internet, so I had to go to the library and check out books on how to wallpaper a wall. But I'm not I have fears about other things, but when it comes to that sort of thing, I'm just like, what's the worst that can happen, right? I mess it up. I maybe, ruin some wallpaper, but it's not a big deal. So, and I love to learn. I love to try new things. That's my strength. But my weakness is kind of the opposite. It's kind of the opposite side of the coin of that. I have way too many interests. And so I can either, have all these projects going at one time, and then I get option paralysis when it's time to start working on something. So then I'm like, okay, then I become overwhelmed. So, I have to like slow my roll when it comes to starting new projects and really practice some discipline about, okay, we're going to finish these 4 projects that are already going before we start something new.
Yes. Okay. So you will be strategic and limit the scope of your, because I very similar. I think a lot of moms anyway, but yeah, I always just have new ideas. My husband has learned just to, like, if I say something, it doesn't mean all 10 of the things are going to happen this
Right.
week, but I'm just always like brainstorming. So for you, will you, like, if you have 10 projects on your mind, you will just say, I can't work on those other new ideas till I finish something. Is that kind of
Yes.
what I'm hearing your approach is?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely. And I wasn't
That's
always
really
like that.
good.
I was not always like that. In the beginning, that's what I was saying.
Mm,
I would have all these projects going and try all these things and
yeah.
then, just never get to the toilets or whatever really needed to get done.
So was there like a point of pain where you realized you had to change that?
I not so much. I just think it was over time, just
Mm,
developing a recognition of how uncomfortable it was
yeah.
to be in that place of overwhelm and just
Mm,
like I don't like that feeling. As much as I like to try new things, I don't like that feeling even more,
mm,
than I enjoy the experimentation. So that's
yeah.
probably what it was over
Yeah.
time.
That makes sense. Just
Hmm.
growing wiser and learning. Yeah, that's great. Well, let's dive a little bit into some of the expectations and challenges you had in your homemaking journey. Can you share a little bit about what surprised you most about homemaking, whether it was good or bad,
Hmm.
just something that took you off guard?
Yes. Okay. The bad first.
Okay.
The bad would be that um, I am the boss of my own time. There's a theme here, if you haven't noticed.
There usually is. Yeah. Yeah.
The great thing about homemaking is you have this big canvas of time before you every day, and you get to decide how to spend your time each day.
Hmm.
And I know children do have a lot to say in that equation as well, their needs. You're meeting your children's needs, obviously. But as far as the way that you go about your task and your job as a homemaker, that's up to you how that looks each and every day. And that's so freeing and lovely. But because you don't have somebody looking over your shoulder, kind of keeping you accountable for how you're spending your time, it can be really easy to sort of fritter away the time and not manage it well. And that was something that surprised me. Like, I was surprised at how much time I had, but then how, like, I had all day. What did I do? I didn't get anything done. And this was before I had kids. Just knowing that I had wasted a lot of time. And so that was something I wasn't expecting, and I had to learn to kind of be better about that. Um, the good, two things. Okay. So the first would be the endless creative and intellectual stimulation of homemaking. I do not know how you can be bored with this job if you truly embrace it. If you truly embrace the calling, and that doesn't mean we're all doing the same things, but there's so much you can do in this role, and so much to learn and grow in. And so I don't know how you could be bored. It's just endless. But the second good thing, most surprising thing to me was how, and this is something I've learned over time, how much it is a metaphor for the gospel.
Mm,
Um, and that is why I believe that the enemy has worked so hard. As one writer in this Gospel Coalition article that I was reading as I prepared for this today, she said, she called it masking the glory of homemaking. And I feel like that's what the enemy has done, because especially over the past 150 years or so, when we've moved from a very home-centered industry sort of culture to where everyone's work moved outside of the home, right? But before that, everybody's work in the home was valued because it was necessary for the whole survival of this family and the community, to the women's lib movement and the sexual revolution and all of those things. Why are we at a place now where this particular job of homemaker is so distasteful to our modern sensibilities? I think it's because the enemy, it's a tactic of his to distract and deflect attention of just how glorious that this work that we do in the home can be when it reflects the glory of the gospel. It's because the gospel is all about sacrifice so that others might live and thrive. And so what did we lose in the garden? We lost a home. And what did Christ come to do? To restore us to our home with God, where all of us are ultimately meant to be at home. And how did he do it? He did it through sacrifice, through pouring himself out and laying himself down for others. And that's what we do every day in homemaking. We pour ourselves out in laundry, in meal prep, in conflict management, in changing dirty diapers, weathering teen rage from hormones. I mean, all of that. We are pouring ourselves out as we walk through that day after day. But our flesh, at least my flesh, fights against that sacrifice so hard. I don't want to die to my agenda, to my desires. I just don't. But it's only in dying and laying that aside for somebody else that I'm actually going to live. It's only in giving up my life that I'm truly going to find it. If I cling to it and I insist on life on my terms, not God's, then I get death ultimately. And that's what we see all around us is dead homes. We see homes that are, empty most of the time because everybody's gone doing stuff at work or whatever. We see, homes that maybe people are there, but is there flourishing happening there? I don't know. We see that in our culture today, and that's the opposite of what I want. So I've been so surprised at how much I get to preach the gospel to myself through homemaking every day, and then, inflesh it and let my homemaking be a picture of the gospel to the people who are in my home.
Oh man, there's so many ways there's so many things I want to ask further about, because that is just really, I think that's the crux of homemaking, is that, and why maybe the two go together. People think it's boring and monotonous because there is that element of sacrifice. And at the same time, the element of sacrifice is actually a way we picture what Christ did for us on the cross and why it's so glorious, So, I love that. I've never heard it said so articulately. I was curious. I know you said you don't understand how anyone could be bored at home.
Yeah.
And I totally get it. I have 3 little kids. I feel like there's so much to do. But at the same time, I have heard moms say they are bored at home. I'm curious, what would you say to a mom who says, I'm bored in this role as a homemaker?
Yeah. I think, I don't know that I could give like a blanket piece of advice. To me, that's more of an individual question. I would want to know her and understand her experience, and because I want to be careful not to just throw out platitudes and, and I guess maybe I kind of did that when I was like, well, I don't see how you can be bored. Because I do, you make a good point. There are certain circumstances that can make it extra challenging for people to lay down their life. I think of people, I've interviewed several people who are full-time caregivers, either for a child or a spouse or, whoever, a parent. That is a whole nother level of laying down your life right there. And so I want to acknowledge that. But if we're talking about your average homemaker, maybe it's got a couple of kids, and I would just challenge her to really look at her days and be prayerful. Definitely start with prayer. Like, be prayerful about it and ask the Lord, you have given me this time as a gift. You've entrusted it to me. I think it really helps for us to think of the time that we have as homemakers as a trust. Or if you think about the parable of the talents, it's a talent that you've been given. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to bury it in the ground and say, well, I'm just bored, and not give a good return? So ask him, what do you want me to do with this that you've entrusted to me? And how can I bring a good return for that? And it's going to be different for every person.
Yeah, I think that's good, because I do think some people, like, this would be an extreme example, but if someone put their kid in front of the TV for 8 hours a day and made freezer meals and was like, oh, I'm bored, there's nothing to do. It's like, well, that's because there's work you ought to be doing and are neglecting. But at the same time, you're exactly right. There are those extreme situations where someone is just, changing the diapers of their adult child, or, just really challenging situations like that where it is monotonous, and it will be. So I appreciate the wisdom and the nuance there, but I think it's significant to think about just what has the Lord given me. I've even thought of that. I just recently heard a podcast talking about this concept of like different capacities. So if you are a higher capacity person, you might be functioning at like a level that other people think is good, but you yourself know you're squandering time, or vice versa. Like, you may be genuinely stewarding your time really, really well, but you can't accomplish as much. So I just thought, oh man, it is really between you and the Lord and your conscience in a lot of ways, but it's food for thought for sure. Let's see. So this kind of gets us into our next question. We talked a little bit about challenges people might face in general, but what are special challenges that you yourself have faced in your homemaking journey, and
Mm-hmm.
how did you work through those challenges?
Mm-hmm.
I know you got married young. I don't know if that factors in or other
Yeah.
things, but I'd love to
Yeah.
hear. Yeah.
I mean, there's been a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, one of the things about being married young and being still both of us in school, having no money, when you're married, when you get married, you're immediately independent from your parents. So that qualified us for all kinds of student loans and
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of ways to get in debt, basically.
Oh no.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
didn't think about that.
no, listen,
Yeah.
this is so bad. I hope they still don't do this because this should be illegal, but the credit card companies, they would set up a table outside of the student union on campus
Mm.
and give out like free movie tickets and pizza and stuff if you would just sign up for their credit card. And we're like,
Wow.
yeah, I want free movie tickets and pizza. So we signed up
Yeah.
for the credit cards. And then now we have another way to get debt. So
Right.
that was a challenge, just being
Mm.
so young and so just ignorant of how to manage money well.
Mm.
And we paid for those mistakes.
Mm.
We paid for pizza that we ate in 1993 for a long time.
Okay. Oh
It took
no.
us a while to get out of that debt because we would
Oh,
just put everything on the credit card.
oh
Um,
no.
and so
Wow.
we kind of got to a point, after we had our first child, and my husband started working. He graduated and started working a real job. We realized, oh gosh, we were looking down the road at how long it was going to take us to pay off the credit card debt, and we just kind of said, okay, we don't want to be here again ever. We want to
Hmm.
have a plan to pay this off, and we're not going to do this again. And so we started learning how to budget properly and started using things like Quicken and stuff like that to track our spending really, really carefully. This was before Dave Ramsey, so
Okay. Yeah. I was
we
like, did
didn't.
you do the
Yeah,
baby steps? No. Okay.
it was before Dave Ramsey, so
Okay.
we didn't do that. But
Yeah.
fortunately, my husband was a business major. He actually went to grad school for finance, so he's a money guy.
Hmm.
He just so much decided he didn't want to ever be in that position again that he studied it in
Hmm.
school and
Wow.
learned how to manage money. And so that was super helpful. But just making different decisions and learning how to be not look for instant gratification. I think that was probably the biggest lesson that we had to learn was
Hmm.
we don't need the thing right now. We can
Hmm.
wait. We can save. And the
Hmm.
first big purchase we ever made, not in debt, not going into debt, we were able to pay cash for. It felt so good to be able to
Hmm.
do this, was our washer and dryer. So
Yay.
we needed a washer and dryer because we had been living at places where we were renting and it usually came with one, or there was like a laundry, facility in the apartment complex or whatever. But this was one of the first places we were renting this little house and it didn't have one and we needed one. And so we saved and my husband got a small bonus that year and we were able to allocate some of the bonus in our savings and we pay cash and it felt so good to pay cash. So that
Hmm.
was kind of the beginning of that journey to just making wiser financial decisions.
And how cool that you've been on that journey together,
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes I think about that with my husband. Like, I wish, whatever, we're in a 2-bedroom house, we're saving for other things. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man, we should, like, why do we have to go through this together? But I do think there is something beautiful about having struggled together as a couple and then come through to the other side. And you have that
Mm-hmm.
shared pain and then the shared, like, wins of getting
Well,
out of debt or whatever.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And learning the lesson together, because I think sometimes you have a couple that gets together, maybe whether they're younger or maybe a little bit older, and perhaps one has already learned that lesson and maybe the other one hasn't, and there can be a lot of conflict
Mm,
there.
yes.
If they have different spending habits and different ideas about money. So I am really grateful that we were both so foolish at the same time
Yeah.
and made those decisions that we paid for a long time and then learned the lesson together. Yeah, you're absolutely
Mm.
right.
So is one of you more of a spender or saver, or you just like we're on the same trajectory?
I think we're both on the same
Okay.
trajectory.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I tend to be way more thrifty and
Mm.
like a little bit tighter with money. But my husband is very, very generous. Like he is just, he has that gift of
Mm.
generosity that God has given him. And so I have learned so much from him in that area, really just about trusting I mean, because I've learned that a lot of my tendency to be thrifty and it's not always bad. You know, thrift can be a really wonderful thing, but it can be a lack of trust in the Lord's provision. So that was something that I had to deal with.
It's good. Yep, my husband's way more generous too. And if I didn't have him, I wouldn't have realized that it can be stingy sometimes. Even I can put it in the cloak of frugality and wisdom, like all these words but it's like sometimes it's just not wanting to meet someone else's need because I want security in the future. I don't think God will give me security. So it's good to have spouses that are different from us to help, balance us out. Okay, so being a fan of your podcast, I have heard a lot of your episodes, and some of like my favorites are your holiday ones. But I've noticed this theme of hospitality in your homemaking, and you'll throw these really cool, elaborate parties. And I'm like, wow, that's so cool. But I know you weren't maybe always at that level. So can you share a little bit about your hospitality and maybe what it looked like to include your own kids in hospitality and like how that process has developed over the years?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
So that's something my husband and I have in common. We love having people over. We love hosting. Always have. We were always, especially because we married so young and we were kind of in our friend group, we were the stable ones. So we always had a nicer place. So all the friends in college would come to our house and hang out. And it's kind of always been like that. So we love to open our home and we love to host. And we just always did that in front of our kids, and inviting them in to, feel like they can have friends over. Of course, that's always something we tried to make sure that they knew they could do. One of my favorite eras or times as a mom was the teenage years, because I loved when my kids would bring their friends home. It's the energy of teenagers is so lovely. Like it can be not lovely. Yes, we all know that. But just they're so vivacious and alive, and what makes them annoying sometimes, but there's just something really cool about having a house full of teenagers. They love whatever food you cook for them, especially the boys. They will eat anything. Yeah. So, if you need like some boosting on your cooking skills, like what you're, learning how to cook or whatever, cook for teenage boys and you will feel so good about your skills, and because they'll love it. They'll eat it up. So I loved encouraging my kids to bring their friends over, when they were all still living at home and even in college. Where we live here in the Texas Hill Country is a really cool location, and there's a lot of really cool things within less than an hour's drive from our house. And so we were like a free destination spot for spring break and stuff like that. So,
nice.
Often, our kids would bring a handful of friends and they would stay at our house, and they would kind of just do like a spring break on the cheap because they could stay here and we would feed them, and then they could go do fun, cool stuff. Oh, nice. So that was really fun. But I think with the kids, I just wanted to help them see that the home was an extension of our family culture that not everybody had the benefit of in their own homes. And I wanted them to know that they could welcome somebody in who needed that kind of environment. They needed the love that they would experience here in our home, even just for a little while. And we still have some of our kids' friends who, actually just a few weeks ago, one of the boys, buddies, he's friends with all our boys, but he came to our house. He stopped by. It's like 8:00 at night, and we hadn't seen him in a couple of years. He lives up in Austin now, and he was down in San Antonio for work for something, and he was like, I just knew that if I didn't stop and say hey, I would regret it. And I'm like, oh man, that's awesome. Like, thank you, Lord, for that. That's just so encouraging. It was so great to see him, but then also that he felt like he could just stop by our house. He said, yeah, I was hoping you guys hadn't moved or anything. Like,
so
yeah,
he
we're
just like knocked on your door
yes.
just out of the blue.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, Alison, I want to ask, because I think a lot of listeners maybe have insecurities about hosting, and you guys just sound like you were like the party house. Like people wanted to come over, they're stopping by unexpectedly. They wanted to be there in college. Were there any things you did practically to cultivate that, where people wanted to be in your home, or like your teenage sons wanted to, and their friends wanted to be there? Because yeah, I would just love to learn about that.
I mean, yeah, I think if you're intimidated with that, the best rule of thumb is just to keep it simple. Don't feel like you have to put on this big show, no matter who's coming over. Work within your capacity, right? There's that word again. Like, what is your capacity right now? You want to be a host to people. You want people to feel like they can come to your home, but you don't want to go past your own capacity, because then you're not going to be a very pleasant hostess. So you want to not have stress yourself, so that when people walk in, they don't feel like they're imposing on your time. I think that's one of the biggest things. I never wanted guests, whether it was my kids' friends or people that I had invited, to feel like they were inconveniencing me by being here. And they would have felt that way if I had stressed myself out with a bazillion details of things that I want to do. And most of the time when we host, it is very low key. I do some fun parties where it's very themed, but that's like maybe a couple times a year, like maybe. Most of the things we do, it's simple. It's probably paper plates. It's something that's a big batch of, spaghetti or jambalaya or something easy that will feed a lot of people, and I don't have to stress out over. I'm not doing like, rack of lamb or anything like that. That's not how I do hosting, because that would stress me out. And then nobody would want to be around me if I was stressed out. So I don't know if that answers your question. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I think the tone is kind of what you're getting at. Like,
yes.
If you're frantic and angry, or, like
exactly.
you're like scrambling, and then you're putting on this, plastering a happy face on the second guest come in, it's like you can still kind of feel that in the home. That's really good. So this is kind of moving to another topic, but how did you set priorities in your home and keep them in order? Because I think with kids and house projects and work and church, it can just all start to get out of hand, and suddenly you're gone and you don't really have much of a home culture. So how did you maintain those priorities?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, so those two things, the setting the priorities and the keeping the priorities, are two different components that work towards the same goal, which is living according to your values. And this is something that I've really I kind of knew it, sort of, but I didn't really understand this concept until fairly recently, from my counselor that I've been seeing for the last few years. And she explained to me, we all live according to certain values. And actually we have a whole episode on this. It's one of the pillars, the foundational pillars.
Go listen. Yeah.
Thanks. And it's all about how you're going to live according to certain values, whether you realize it or not. Are you living according to the values that matter to you? And so doing a values assessment is super helpful when you want to set your priorities. And that's something you can do very formally. You can sit down and fill out the whole thing. We have one. I can give you the link. But discussing that with someone who knows you really well, like your husband, or, your sister or your mom, like, what do you think the way I live and the things that I spend my time on reflect about what my values are? And then have an honest discussion about that. So that's something that I try to do fairly regularly, like once a year now that I understand this concept of values assessment. And then the second thing that I would have done for many, many years is trying to set yearly goals and quarterly goals that kind of line up with my values or what's important, or what I, really want to make sure that we get to, both personally and as a couple or a family. So for example, travel, I said we always live very far away from our family. And so travel to go see our family was very important to us. for our own benefit and even for like a vacation, because our family happens to live in North Florida where some of the world's most beautiful beaches are. So it's not really a burden to go there.
It's handy.
But we would have to, that's a value. That's something that's really important to us as family. And so we would have to sit down at the beginning of the year and say, okay, when are we going to go visit this year? Go ahead and carve that out and make that time. So that's just one example. And then that's the setting. And then the keeping of priorities is that's the constantly moving forward towards the goals, right? But it's also daily thriving according to what your values are. So for me, that looks like monthly planning. Every month I have a little planner. It's actually a blank bullet journal style notebook. I've tried all of the planners known to man, and there's always something I just don't quite like, and I tweak this and I end up not using it. So I just have a blank notebook and I sort of build my own. And I have a monthly spread. So I do that at the beginning of every month. I actually do it before the beginning of the month, just sort of getting a big picture of the month, and I revisit it regularly to make sure I don't miss anything. And then the weekly planning, that's just every week, either on Saturday or Sunday, I sit down, I make a weekly spread to figure out, I look at my monthly and I say, okay, what's coming up this week? What are my big anchors that I want to go ahead and place for the week to make sure that I get to those things that are part of my values, my non-negotiables, if you will. And then meal planning, weekly meal plans. I do that on Thursday. I put in my grocery order Thursday night, and groceries, I either pick them up or have them delivered on Friday. And that's pretty much, for the most part, I live and die by that schedule, because I know that that's going to help me be successful in the week to come, with all of the things. If I know what we're eating and when I need to take meat out or when I need to prepare something. So those three things, if I do those consistently, monthly, weekly, and meal planning, my days are so much more fruitful, and I can be more flexible with whatever the Lord might bring me unexpectedly on a particular day. And it helps me shift. I can shift or pivot really quickly because I kind of have a good picture of what I need to do that week and where I have room to move.
That's so insightful, because I do think some people believe if they have a plan or structure, they won't be able to enjoy flexibility. But actually, if you have no idea what's for dinner, what your schedule is, it's like, well, we could have done that, except for we have no food in our house, or you know, it's like, that's very true that having a plan can actually allow for that flexibility. And I think it's so insightful that you plan your goals according to your values, because I do think it is common for, I think pretty much everyone out there who has a family would say, my family is a priority. If you're, a Christian, Christ is, the one you're worshiping. He's the first priority, right?
Yes.
But then you set all these New Year's resolutions that don't even align with either of those, And so you're measuring your success in a totally different category than what your value is. So that's really good. And then you break it down. Do you have, it's okay. It's okay if you don't. Well, I wanted to get into some rapid fire questions. You do this on your podcast as well. And I just think this is some of my favorite parts of your podcast. So can you start by sharing a memorable homemaking fail?
Okay. I don't really have a story for you. I just okay, there's so many, lots of little fails, lots of bad recipes, lots of just dumb things that I did. But I prayed about it, and these answers to these questions, and I kept coming back to fear, anxiety, and worry. When I feel like the biggest areas where I have failed, those have always been at the bottom of it. Like, this is what caused this. Letting those things motivate me have always led to some kind of fail in homemaking and in life in general. And it's no way to live. Like, if I have any regrets, it's usually because of fear or anxiety or worry.
Wow, that's good. I love that. I was thinking, some cooking failure, but that is so accurate that most of the most distressing things in our home can come out of that place of fear when we're not trusting the Lord and trying to control the situation. So that's really good. What about a memorable homemaking achievement?
Okay, so I always feel like I am achieving or have achieved my main goal of homemaking when any of these three things happen. My kids want to come back and visit.
Aw.
That's so great. When guests linger long,
Mm-hmm.
that I just love that when they don't feel rushed to leave or, you know, like I said before, like they're inconveniencing us. That to me that's a huge win. And if people tell me that my home is cozy, that's
Ooh.
that's such a win for me, especially as a thrifter,
Oh.
because that's, 90% of what's in my house has been thrifted. And so,
Aw.
that's not everybody's jam, but it is my jam and I love it. And so when somebody walks into my home and says, "Oh, your house is so cozy. It's like a hug." I'm like, "Thank you."
Oh, that's what you
That's a big
want.
win. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Okay, favorite homemaking hack or tip? I've been so curious because this is like you do homemaking as a
I
big part of
know.
your. So I'm like, what's your hack,
It's
Allison?
not it's not earth-shattering, but this is one that it it was so life-altering for me when I learned this many years ago that I always have to share it with people. If you are measuring out, and you probably already know this, but somebody out there doesn't know and it's going to change your life. If you're measuring out something sticky, if you're baking and you're measuring out molasses or honey or something really sticky like that, you know how when you go to pour it out, it doesn't all
Yeah.
come out. So spray your measuring whatever it is with like, nonstick spray. If it's a tablespoon or even
Oh.
like if it's a cup, like a glass measuring cup, spray it with nonstick spray. If you don't use nonstick spray, you can just put a little oil in there and just swirl
Huh.
it around and then put the sticky substance in. And then when you go to pour it
Smart.
out, it'll just slide right out.
What?
Yes. Right?
That's amazing. I love that. I love the idea of nonstick spray. I've sometimes done the like cheap version where you're making muffins and it calls for honey and oil and I like use the same measuring cup, but I have never even
Yeah.
heard of the nonstick spray. Because that's
There
a
you
real,
go.
it's those little things. But
I
like you end
know.
up irritated. The little
Yes.
things make the biggest difference sometimes.
Yes.
That is very fun. Okay, homemaking tool or product you can't live without.
Okay, I have two.
Okay.
I have a I have
Yay.
a runner up and then I have the winner. So the
Perfect.
runner up is my countertop toaster oven.
Hmm.
And it's not like a college toaster oven. It's a Breville, like a 5-in-1 or so. I don't know. It does a whole bunch of stuff that I don't necessarily use, but mainly we use it as an oven and we use it as an air fryer. Those are the top two things that we do with it. I'm on my second one. Actually, we had one that we had for like 6 years and it finally died. The fan died. It still worked, but the fan quit working. So it wasn't doing the convection thing. But
Yeah.
anyway, especially as empty nesters, I maybe use my bake oven once a week. I use my countertop oven probably twice a day minimum.
Wow.
So
Does
I
it
love
heat
it.
up the kitchen or it doesn't?
No. And that's
Well,
one of the
that's a
reasons I
hack.
love it is because it doesn't
Yeah.
heat the kitchen up and it preheats really fast.
Hmm.
So the cook time is quicker because I can get
Hmm.
the thing in there and get it cooked and I'm done. So that's the runner up. But the
Okay.
winner, if my listeners are listening, they're like, "Oh, she's going to say super cubes." I'm not going to say super cubes, although I do love my super cubes. But the winner is mason jars. I use mason jars for everything. I store things in them in the freezer, in the refrigerator. I use them for leftovers. I decant and put stuff in the pantry, and I have mason jars of every size, little ones, big giant ones. I can with them, like I make preserves and stuff. Not as much as I used to, but I love them. They're so versatile. You can use them
Hmm.
in every room of the house. You can put pins in them. You can put cotton balls in them in the bathroom. They're
That's
wonderful.
so true.
I love them.
Wow. That's really good. It's true. Because, yeah, I love that. We use mason jars. We just started like a little pom pom reward system and we use them for pom poms. So, I
There you
mean,
go.
anything, yeah,
Yes.
anything you would like, you could use them
Yep.
for. I love that. Okay. And then your signature dish.
All right. I polled my family for this.
Oh,
And
smart.
yes,
That's a good
well,
way
that's
too.
what my guests often do. So I learned from them. Hands down, it was roast rice and corn.
Oh.
So I was born in Louisiana. I grew up mostly in Florida, but born in Louisiana. And in Louisiana, we would call it rice and gravy. So it's a piece of meat, kind of like a roasted piece of meat that it can be beef, it can be pork, something that will make like a really savory, like, um, it's fond. It's the drippings, like stick to the bottom of the pan. So then you can pour broth in it and you can make like a really nice, delicious gravy out of that. And then you serve it with rice, and it's so wonderful. And I grew up eating that in the summers. I would go and stay with my grandmother, and she would make that often. And I had just such a lovely memory of sitting around her dining room table and eating roast and rice. And she would always serve it with corn, and usually melon on the side because it was in the summer. But yeah, so I started cooking that a long, long time ago for my family, and it is like the go-to meal. I do it different. I do it in the oven. I don't do it sort of the traditional Cajun way, but it's basically the same thing. And my kids are like, yes, that's the meal, because that's the one they most request for like birthdays and stuff.
Wow. So is it like kind of like roast and potatoes, but you use rice instead? Like, is
No,
it like, or just totally different?
Totally different. Totally different.
Like,
the rice is cooked separately.
Okay.
And it's like a rich gravy. The way that I make it, you're braising the meat in a little bit of beef broth and some butter and its own juice. And then you can thicken up the gravy and you break the meat apart into chunks, and it's so good.
Okay. Wow. Well, would it be too much trouble to include that recipe for our listeners?
I can totally send you that recipe.
Okay. Because see, I want to try it. It sounds so good.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. So you ask this question every time, and I would love to ask it because your whole podcast is called The Art of Home. Mm-hmm. And so how do you personally see homemaking as an art? I don't think I've ever heard you answer this.
Okay. Well, I have asked over 100 women this question, and I've gotten back over 100 different answers. A lot of them are similar, but they're all unique, which is part of my answer. So a little bit of history, why I called it The Art of Home. So before I started this 5 years ago, I was about to have a fully empty nest. I was taking art classes. I had been taking some art classes for a couple of years and trying to decide what I was going to do with my empty nest.
Right.
I started listening to some different homemaking podcasts. I kind of discovered podcasts around that time too, and was instantly hooked.
Yes.
And I found some great ones, but I realized that there was a hole there, a bit of a void. Like a lot of what I was hearing were, great conversations between like maybe two hosts or whatever, but they were all influencers or authors and I was like, where are the stories of the normal women, like the regular women? That was what was missing. And so that was kind of how the idea for the podcast was born. And I started thinking, now, okay, I'm going to do this show. What am I going to call it? I had started to see some really interesting parallels between both art making and homemaking. And that was why I ended up calling it The Art of Home, because it's unique to the artist, right? Just like a piece of artwork is unique to the artist who made it. I love Impressionist art. So I don't know a lot about other art, but Impressionist art, like I can tell you put 3 paintings in front of me. That's a Monet, that's a Renoir, and that's a Cassatt.
Wow.
The way that I can tell, this is Susan's home, this is Dana's home, and this is my mom's home. Like each of them bears the unique mark of the woman that is practicing the art of home there, just like a piece of art would. And the second thing that I noticed was that no one is born good at it. So just like an artist, no artist came out of the womb with a paintbrush in their hand, able to just make a masterpiece. They had to learn, they had to study, they had to start with the basics and progress into mastery with lots of different skills. And it's the same way. It's the same thing with homemaking. You're not born good at it. You have to learn and grow. And you have to be okay with failure, because that's what leads to your growth and eventually to mastery. We only get to see the very best works, whether it's in the art gallery or on Instagram. If we're looking at other homemakers, we don't get to see all the fails and all the, hundreds of messy or ugly paintings that somebody made. And it's the same thing with homemaking. There's way more of that than those masterpieces, right? So we have to be okay with failure as artists and as homemakers practicing the art of home. Going into either one, expecting a masterpiece right away, you're either never going to start or you'll never take the risks that you need in order to get the experience you need to get better. You're going to miss that freedom of trying new things. And as Bob Ross the late great Bob Ross, the painter, would say a happy accident, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever watched him, but
Yes.
he would mess up on his canvas. Oh, that's just a happy accident. We'll just turn it into a happy little bird, you know?
Yeah.
But you miss out on that if you're paralyzed by like perfectionism and this has to be a masterpiece. If you're, whether we're talking about painting or homemaking, it's the same thing. You have to be willing to take risks and fail, because that's how you learn and that's how you grow. So that's how I see it as an art.
Oh, that's so good. I see now I understand like the whole concept behind your podcast. It's so good, you guys. All those listeners should go check it out right now. And what you're saying, it reminds me, there's this book I was reading called Hidden Potential, and it talks about like there's sometimes people think they have like this mental block. They think they can't conquer a skill, whether it's learning a language or something like that. And it's because they are unwilling to try the one thing that will make it better. So like for a lot of people with language, they're unwilling to just go speak it with someone because they don't feel like they're good enough yet.
Yeah.
But that's actually the one way they will develop the skill. And
Exactly.
I love that you point that out with art and with homemaking. You have to start somewhere. And if you wait until you feel competent, you won't start. And so
exactly.
So that's just, that's very accurate and true in other spheres of life. But I think sometimes homemakers maybe can make it more of an identity thing and just say, I'm just not a good homemaker. I'm just not a natural homemaker.
Yes.
But when you view it as like, this is a skill that you hone and you have failures, that's really excellent. Yeah. Okay. So then a lot of this show is directed towards younger moms. So I wanted to ask a question that you ask on your podcast as well. What word of advice or encouragement would you give to younger homemakers? Because I'm sure you see the gamut. You're kind of in this world.
Yeah. Probably the biggest thing that comes up the most with most of my guests, because I do talk to women of all ages. I started the show just talking to older women. The first couple of years or the first year is just older, more experienced, seasoned homemakers, we call them. But then I branched out and I talked to newly married homemakers. I've talked to a couple of single gals but across the gamut, the one thing that is consistently comes up with almost every guest is something about perfectionism. And so I would just say, let go of perfectionism and be okay with failing. I know we just kind of talked about that, but it's so important because if you don't, you're going to stagnate in your growth as a homemaker. You have to entrust your practice of the art of home to the Lord and just jump in and just do the thing. Like, learning another language. If you really want to get good at it, you're going to have to go speak it and sound dumb. You have to be willing to sound dumb, like, then mess up and trip over your words. It's the same thing. You have to be willing to fail. Don't be so paralyzed by your fear and your perfectionism that you miss all these opportunities that God is sending you every single day to grow, because it's all meant for His glory. It's really just our pride that gets in the way. If we view what we do every day as working unto the Lord, as for His glory, and we do it with all of our might, our soul, mind, and strength, and love Him as we do it, He's gonna bring growth and good out of it, no matter how much we mess up. He wants to grow you spiritually through your practice of the art of home. And that means you're going to have to be willing to fail if you're going to grow. So will you trust Him to use all of it, even your failures, for your good and the good of those around you? You can trust Him. Just keep showing up and keep practicing your art. Let Him determine the results.
Ah, Alison, that's like the battle cry right there. I'm going to leave it there. That is beautiful. I'm sure our listeners want to know more about how they can find you at this point. So can you share where they can find you and all of those good details?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you for asking. You can find all the things at theartofhomepodcast.com. That is the best place to contact me to find out what we have going on. You can actually listen to the podcast over there on the website, but you can also listen to The Art of Home anywhere you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, all the places. You will also find out information there about our brand new resource that we just came out with. It's a magazine of sorts. It's called Homemaker's Journal. We just came out with that in May. The first issue came out in May. And it is a seasonal publication meant to encourage and strengthen you in your homemaking. It's a place for you to be inspired. It's a place for you to take notes and records of your own homemaking. It's just really life-giving. There's the first issue has 13 homemakers who contributed their writing to it, and it's just so lovely. I'm really proud of it, and I was so grateful to get to work with these amazing women who just put together such beautiful articles for the magazine. So you can find out about that also over at theartofhomepodcast.com. And if you want to be in the loop and know what all is happening with us, get on our mailing list. I promise I won't spam you. I might email you once, every couple of weeks, but you'll be in the loop. So
perfect. Oh, well, Alison, it's been such an honor. Thank you so much again for joining me today.
Oh, Hannah, I have enjoyed this immensely. It's been so unique to be on this side. It's been a really different experience to be on this side of the microphone with my own questions, and you did a wonderful job asking them. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you, Alison. Okay, take care.
Mm-hmm.